welcome everyone. This is our first Fred Talk. You've heard of TED Talks. Well, this is Fred Talk. We're just a venue for allowing creative people to come in and speak about their creative process and their inspiration. And since moving to Fredericksburg, what I really enjoy about Fredericksburg is that there's really a lot of interesting and cool people and creative people in Fredericksburg. And Deborah Harrington is one of our favorite people here in town. She's very interesting and she has lots of knowledge to share. So without further ado, Deborah Harrington, please come up.
Thank you. Okay, so I was asked to do the first Fred's Talk, and thank you very much for having me. And I was thinking about what I would talk about, and I thought that I would talk about something that really kind of changed my life and my inspiration as an artist. And it happened probably in 2000, and I was teaching at a high school in San Diego. And I was teaching a bunch of high school students, and I had to come upon explaining color. I didn't know anything how to explain color. I went, I don't know how to explain color because I don't know, even though I've been painting for a long time. And so I madly went down to one of the stores, and I picked up this book, and it was called Full Spectrum Color by Susan Starbuck. And I opened it up, and I was breathless, and I thought, wow, this is really going to explain color to me. My whole life I was really interested in Impressionist art, and I didn't really understand how it worked. I just know that I was totally drawn to it. And full spectrum color comes from Hawthorne, which was a very famous man in the early, I'd say, 30s, 40s, and he created a group in the East of artists, and it's all broken down how to be painting somewhat like Monet and his strategy, the background. So I set off to one of her workshops in Sacramento, California, for a week. And here I'd been a paintbrush portrait artist for, 20-some years. And this called for a palette knife. And I was completely out of my comfort zone. And then I had to get my plein air easel, my first plein air easel, and set up in this class, and I didn't know what I was doing, and my heart was racing, and I hated it. But this teacher was so good, and I learned quite a bit there. So I'm going to share with you kind of where I started out. And then I think as most artists, as we progress in our work, we make it our own. So we kind of transcribe it as we move along. But we come from a strong learning something, and then we have to kind of break it all down, and then we have to recreate it ourselves. So over the last, I would say, that was 2000, so 17 years, 16 years, 17 years, I have evolved into pretty much now my breakdown of where this comes from. Living in California, living in the East Coast, living overseas, living in Texas, every place creates a different color scheme. So you have to adapt if you're going to be moving around. California is a very high key, that's where I came from, so my color was very light there. East Coast was definitely portrait work, more traditional. And here it's very somber, and you have earth tones, so I had to change all of my color scheme here. But I'm still going to go back to what I originally learned from Susan Starbuck. And so I took that workshop, and then I took another one with her at Carmel on the beach, plein air painting. And with that, I came home determined to understand this theory. So what I would do, if you remember, Monet would do like a series of paintings of the like haystacks. He would set up like 15 canvases, and then he would move at every half hour to the next canvas and repaint the color, repaint the color, repaint the color. So that's what I was doing in my backyard. I don't have those things anymore, sold all of them, but I would take like one tree or one scene, and then I would go back to it every half hour and change it and learn how to see color. It was really difficult, but I really learned a lot. So with that, I'll start with this is one of my first works with Susan Starbuck. And how she set up in her training was she would have a number of still lifes with blocks with real strong light on it, and they were all different colors and different shadow and cast, different backgrounds as well. and you would be set up in front of your station, and then you would go through this breakdown approach to understanding how color works. Now, I don't have the underlay, but I'll explain it to you. This is like the final stage. But to start off with, everything that's in the light has to be warm. So this is a blue block, correct? It had to start out as an orange. So every surface that you're looking at, every plane, has to be a different color, and it has to relate to the light. So this is in the light. This is a red block. Has a little backlight where you have reflective light, and this would be mostly in the shadows. So the shadows are on the front side. So the original color for this one was orange. The original color for this one was like a purple, which is a little bit cooler. And the original color for this was, let's see if I can see, it was a red, actually. And it's going to turn out looking like a blue block. I know, it sounds crazy. And then you have your cast shadow, which is the darkest. And that cast shadow, I believe, as it looks like, was probably a really dark green. This one is a red block. So it was easier to do this one because in the light, you could go with a warm color. So I started out there with an orange. And then this one right here was probably in a alizarin crimson. And this one was probably in a dark orange, probably a dark orange. And then my cast shadow is going to be in a blue. Okay, if I've lost you already, I may have lost you. And it's really hard because you have to imagine what you're seeing even though you're not seeing it. But you have to understand how color works. So I'm going to stop here so I can explain it a little bit better in my theory and move over to a chart that I always work from. Okay, so if you can see this, what I ask for when I'm looking at a painting are three different things. And if they're in balance, then you're in balance. If they're out of balance, you'll know why they're out of balance. The first one would be, is there light and dark in your picture? If everything's light, it's going to be blocked. If everything's dark, obviously you won't see it. So you have to have a contrast of light and dark in everything that you see. The next one is warm and cool. So warms are all the sun colors, and cools are all the shadow colors. There needs to be a balance of warm and cool. If everything was hot, then if everything was hot, it would just look like it would be too one-sided. So you need a balance. This is probably the most difficult one for people to see, but this is called bright and dull. So everything that's bright has to be warm, and it has to have a little bit of yellow in it. And dull is when you start mixing the opposites. So when I teach in schools, I teach over at Ambleside, this is what I work with students from day one. So if they get this, and we have that approach in understanding color, I can explain how to get to certain places and why this one isn't working and why this one is not, and I can point it out. This just really, really works. For instance, I'll have an artist come in, a young artist who's learning, who's real soft in their colors, and everything ends up being not enough contrast of light and dark. It's all in that middle tone. Even though it's color, it's all in that middle tone. So then I'll say, okay, one needs to be darker, one needs to be lighter. And they don't quite get it, but they'll get it eventually. And then the other one is how to make something, if everything is bright in your picture, it won't be bright. So in order for it to be bright, you have to have dull next to it. You have to have that contrast, that balance. So how do you make dull? So they have to know opposites. The opposite of yellow is purple, the opposite of orange is blue, the opposite of red is green, and that could vary a lot in all degrees, but just basic colors. So when you put yellow and purple next to each other, and this is where the Impressionists got their pop, is when you put opposites next to each other, they vibrate. But when you blend them, they get dull. So when people have muddy paintings, you can go, okay, now we need to clean that up for something to really pop, and this is how you do it. If you have a yellow going, I'll go, well, you'll need a background of what? What's the opposite? Purple. I mean, it's that simple, and you have to think about it, because we don't actually see it. We have to learn to see color. Let's see if I can explain a little bit better. This is a little more complicated because it took a lot of time.
Going back to your
Yeah.
blocks,
Uh-huh.
and correct me if I'm wrong,
No.
but I'm perceiving that as you're saying, really, you're painting that block as if the sun was warm. So it's like you're painting it to the degree of where if the sun was hitting it, it would be warmer on top than on the sides, and you basically are taking it from warm sun to cold shadow.
Definitely, but I'm also pre-thinking dull and bright.
Okay.
That's
The contrast.
another aspect.
Okay.
So everything is done in this particular piece here, and it's all the way down the line. This takes many stages to get here. Like this background was a yellow, so or kind of a, I don't know what's that color. It's kind of hard to tell now. I think it was a yellow, and so the opposite of yellow is purple. Even though it doesn't look quite purple, I can add a lot of white to that to make it higher in lighter intensity. So when I mesh them two, they become dull. So I want the background to be dull, but I need to know where I'm going before I even get there. It's kind of like watercolors, where you have to know where you're going before you get there. In oil paints, you can actually, if I were to use a brush with this, I have to be very careful that I don't completely mask up the color underneath it. So this is done with the palette knife. And the reason why she works with a palette knife is because there's no medium. So your brush, when you're working with a brush, which I prefer to work with a brush, if it's not clean, you're picking up, your colors become muted eventually. And I do have that problem, so I have to work in stages to get it back to where I want it to be. I don't think about it in the beginning, but eventually I get it back there. Now, when you're working with a palette knife, there is no medium. You pick up that, you have like 20 colors. You have a large amount of colors, and you have to pick each one up. And a little bit of blending, but there's a lot more colors that you're working with because each one is pure. So you're going to either add white to it, but you're going to bring it on pure, and then you're going to let it bleed over to the other way. It's a lot cleaner, so you get a lot stronger color. And I don't have any of I've sold all of my smaller paintings that I've done on palette knife, but they really pop, and more so than they do with brush, because they're just so intense, because the colors are clean, and so it's a lot different without that pigment. Okay, so where was I? I was trying to think what I was going to say after that. Where was I? I was talking about what?
So, behind you are
Yeah.
examples of your
Yes.
paintings. Can you describe maybe some of the issues you had with color balance in the paintings behind you?
I'm always thinking opposites in them as well. So I'm always doing warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, cool. Yeah. So I do, like if I had, like this one right back here, the cowboy, if I had done his figure in that cool blue-green,
It would have really,
big part,
you probably would have just become
it would have
invisible.
been faded out. So what do? Opposite. You know, I just immediately go right to the opposite. So it pops it out, it gives it that form. And then there's a lot of dark and light involved here. So I have warm and cool, dark and light, bright and dull in all of my paintings. And so if I don't have that, it won't work. Even like this one right here, in order for that edge to pop for me, I had to bring like a warm color against the cool. And I use a lot of blue and yellow, blue and orange in my work. And that's pretty much what my palette is. It's real simple here. When I'm working in California colors, I tend to, go a little bit higher key, probably a lot more colors, but they don't like that in Texas, so not so much. Like that one right here, the horse, it's got almost too much color in it. People go, oh, I don't know if I can match that yellow. So, I mean, I understand, it's just different.
Can you elaborate on when you say people don't like that in Texas? What that
Because they have different color sets out here, different palettes in their furniture and their furnishings and their homes, and the elements that they use, a lot of wood, a lot of stone. So it's, in California, it's white walls. You know, it's real light and bright, so the color they want the color. But here, it's got to kind of fit in. I understand, it's just kind of fit in here. So all my work back here is Texas art. But it's funny that even though that's so very bright, it's still a limited palette. It's not a whole lot of different colors in there. So it doesn't, and that'll still sell. so to say.
Do you set your palette up opposites? Is that kind of how you?
Actually, I set my palette up with all of my cools at the top and all my warms down at the bottom, and I go from light to dark. So I always set it up the same, and then white right in the middle. And I do use black here, whereas before I didn't use black ever. But now I use it. I use browns and different colors here that I've never used before. In California, I use, well, because you want more earth tone. But in California, I mixed all of my darks by using alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and viridian green. That was my black. I mixed those together. That was my dark because they had a lot of color in that. So it's, and I still do that. But more so here, I will use black. I'll put black into a color. It won't be black by itself. Yeah.
You recently told us that you came back from Seattle. What was the color palette that you observed there?
That was interesting. We went to some galleries and they were showing real abstract work that was archival, and it wasn't new. There was just mostly people that had passed, very expensive like works of people that I'm not real familiar with that were abstract artists in the 50s and 60s in real high-end galleries, you know, for real high price. A lot of prints, a lot of print making, which I don't see here so much.
But I mean the color palette. Have you observed a different color
A lot of I don't know, it kind of went the range because you had like really, I know what I saw there that I'd never seen anyplace else. They had like a lot of Indian art that looked like Eskimo art. I'd never seen it. It was a certain region up there. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a certain group of Indians. It looks very Eskimoian. I mean, it didn't look like what I think Indian because I do a lot of Native Americans. It was totem poles, but real bright. It was almost like almost Asian feeling. It was really different. So I didn't get to see a whole lot of art there to say exactly what people were buying. But from the people that I know that are artists, they don't sell very well up there. People don't buy art that much up there. So it's not quite the same. Yeah, it's not quite the same. Yeah, so I mean, you have to spend a lot of time in a place to kind of figure out, and then that changes.
So you work with a lot of different age groups,
right?
Children and adults,
right?
And what would you say children get that adults maybe don't, or vice versa? Like, there's a sensitivity to color that it's easier to work with in one age group than another.
I don't know. It doesn't have anything to do with age groups for me. It has to do with how far. If somebody really has their mind set on something that they like, then it's really hard to work with them, of course. And they go, "Well, I just want it this way," and you go, "Okay." Then, you know, we're not going to open anything up here. We're just going to just continue to do that. But if they're really interested in learning, then those are the people that I'll go into and I'll explain all of this. What happens when somebody starts to see color for the first time is that, and I know this happened to me, when I took that class and I really went through the process of understanding color and seeing color in shadows instead of just dark and light. And I started seeing, oh, that's really a blue. Next to that's really a purple, and I started to really see, it was like, it just changed the whole world to me, and it was like woo, and that happens when you start to work in this process. It's like what I explained initially would be to look at the ceiling of a room, and if you were to take a paint sample down from that and you would look at it, you go, well, this is beige right here, whatever that color is, but when you put it up there and the light hits it, it's not the same color at all throughout.
Right.
And then people weren't even aware of that. They go, but it's white. And I go, no, look at from here to there, it's totally different. Totally different.
So when you see color, you're kind of seeing outside of or beyond light and dark. You're like seeing the spectrums of what's it.
It's called full spectrum because there's color bounces off of everything.
So it's not just white and black,
No.
it's white, gray.
Oh,
different.
it's just,
Okay.
there's so many ranges. I mean, if you come over, and the way to look at it, it takes a while to figure it out, but I always tell the student and myself to take your eye from there and then go here, and then go back and forth quickly, and then just go, that has yellow, that has blue. You kind of go, oh, okay. But if you're just if you aren't aware how light affects color, then you're just going, oh, it's light or dark.
So how would you say light affects color?
Oh, it completely affects it. And every artist you ever know goes, I paint for the light, you know. And it's true. I mean, that it is. But I can see in their work that they still don't even, some of them do and some of them don't understand color. Because they're doing light dark. But when you really see color for what it is, there is a full spectrum of color throughout, and then it's a percentage. It's percentages of color, and that's the part that is very subtle. It's like there will be some yellow here, but it'll be a small percentage, or more yellow here, but a larger percentage. It's percentages. So going back to this right here, if eventually on these blocks I started breaking down, one side is affected different than the other, because as you move away from the light, it changes. So this is closer to the light, and you can see it starts to change down here. Maybe not represented quite as well, but close. And the color will change throughout the shadow. It'll go from warmer to cooler. Color just moves. But it's subtle. It's so subtle, and it takes time to see. So what I'm teaching, it's really hard in the beginning because we aren't trained to see. We're trained to think what we see. So you have to let go of what you think it is, and you have to even just pretend that you think you know what it is. But if you have some kind of format like this right here, which I refer to all the time, I don't even get just what's the opposite? What's the opposite? Or is this dull or is this bright? What makes bright?
Yeah, I love that. I love the analogy with the yellow and the purple, because yellow you can barely see on a white piece of paper. Put that purple next to it, and bam.
And if I had shown, which I could have done, I would put a swatch of yellow all the way down here and put different colors that surrounded it, and I do that as well. I didn't do it here. You would see that I go, which one pops? Oh, the one with the purple next to it. I mean, it's just like bang, you know. So you use that in your thinking mind to actually see it in your visual. But it's hard to see in your visual unless you've thought about it and you go through that I mean, right after I started learning how to see color, I can remember driving down the street, having to pull over because I was just breathless, and it hits you like that, that I just started seeing all this color that I wasn't even aware was there, really. But it was like now, I was like a light went on. I could see all these different shades of blue, and like, what color is that? And it's kind of overwhelming when it hits you. And it does hit you when you go through a lot of this kind of training. And then after a while, you know how to work it, and you know how to see it, and then hopefully how to explain it. And so what I do is I try to keep it simple, because it can be colors like candy. Everybody wants to just paint with color, but they don't know what they're doing with it, and it ends up just kind of a thing, you know. So once you learn how color works and how it moves and how it affects another color and kind of that play, and bring it back to simple. Don't get too crazy, because there's 5 million yellows, there's 5 million oranges, there's 5 million reds. Is it a cool red or warm red? I mean, just like, woo, it's nuts, you know. It can be really overwhelming. Take it back down. Is it yellow? Just that. And then match it with the opposite, or mute it with the opposite. So, like, I wondered why I brought these paintings right here, which I don't have in a lot of these. But this, just a simple painting of this. Everything in this is dull. So what did I have to do? I have to add this really bright. I get the intensity. Now if everything was bright, this wouldn't show up, right? So, I mean, it's just understanding how color is going to work there. And what color should it be? Well, it's primarily blue, so I'm going to go with kind of a tinge of orange, opposite. Even though it looks a little more yellow there. Kind of changes. So in order for something to pop, you need the opposite next to it. So a lot of times when I'm looking at some of these older paintings like right over here, nothing pops on those. It's just light and dark. Color changes. Color really changes. And this one right here in particular, this one really changes because this person really understands color. Yeah, and it's just, to me, it's just a different world, this. as opposed to just light and dark. And this is what happened with that was, in the history of art, the artists never went outside. They didn't paint outside. They didn't paint in the day. They would do like either a snapshot and take it home and remember what it was. These people actually observed in real time color and how to do that. That's the Impressionists. When they came about, they actually saw the color moving. You know, it really was. That's why we love the Impressionists. I mean, it's just like, you look at that and your heart goes, woo! I mean, it's alive. And so there's a lot of theory there when you start to look at it, how they broke Monet in particular. How he got things to really pop is how he put colors next to each other. Not muted together, but next to each other. So they just kept vibrating. Now, this one's a little more subtle, but this is a warm and a cool. And the rest of it's kind of dull, but I added just this tinge right here to just kind of lift that out. Had I not, then this would mute into that. So there's just certain things that you go, well, what do I do there to make that happen? I love to outline. That's just one of the things I like to do. So a lot of what I'm doing now came from this, but I don't do that in particular. I still go back to a little more traditional, a little more somber, a little bit more not so woo, unless I'm doing something like that. So you can move around and try different things when you understand how color works. When you don't understand, you don't know how to get there. So I always think it's real important to know basics and know all these things so that you have more control over the direction that you take, instead of not understanding why things happen. So when a person comes up to me and they go, can you critique this? And I go, well, I'll teach you how to critique it. Is there a balance between light and dark? No. I'll go, well, there's one thing that you might want to comment. Is there a balance between warm and cool? It's too much warm or too much, it's not quite a balance. Therefore, the person can actually learn how to come in and actually learn how to change and work their painting so that all of a sudden you go, oh, it's in balance now. So I try to keep it as simple as possible. I don't go back to exactly that, but I have in the past. I've done a lot of work with that, and I kind of gotten away from it. But I've kind of made it my own now, in a different way. So did I confuse everybody with that? Any questions at all?
Makes sense.
Did it kind of make sense a little bit? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I can't say that I see color the way you do yet, but
okay,
it makes more sense. It makes more sense
right now.
I was doing that up there.
Yeah.
It makes more sense. Yeah.
So it's like this was really funny in class. I had a student that came up to me and said that something that he was showing me in a picture. This is white, and I go, it's not white. It's actually a very light blue. And he goes, no, it's white. And I go, because they told you the dress was white, but you're not really looking at it yet. And I couldn't get him to even open his mind to even see that. So what you have to do is you take a little tiny pinhole of it and you separate it from the whole idea of what something's supposed to be, like your white shirt right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I look at your white shirt, it's got many degrees of white and bright and dull and warm and cool all over that. But you go, it's a white shirt. In your head, you're going, it's a white shirt. So you can't see it. You just can't even see it. So when you understand how light hits it, so everything on where it's really light, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it. A little bit of yellow up here. And then when it comes up here, I'm going to add a cooler, a very small percentage of cool to that white in different parts. And then I'm going to add the shadow and all that. But if you see that the light hits it from this side, it's going to go from warm to cool. It's not going to be a flat white, because color is bouncing off of everything. So when you come into Texas art, there's not a lot of color in it, and it stays in, and a lot of the stuff is dull to me. It's very photoreal and stuff like that. It's extremely photoreal. It's just a different way of painting for me. So it isn't so much about the expression of it so much as trying to be very literal.
So
doing light dark.
So could you
like
say
these over here, right here.
So could you say that you're not really painting color, you're painting light?
painting light.
Yeah.
How it affects. Yeah, this would be the Texas art that I'm kind of talking about over here. It's more traditional. It isn't coloristic at all, and it's mostly dull. Yeah.
Because they say different colors, like
And people
black.
like that, you know. Yeah.
Like the black you're wearing
Uh-huh.
is supposed to absorb all the light, and therefore
Uh-huh.
we perceive it as black.
Mhm.
But it's
But-
doing
oh,
some,
yeah, it's
but
totally
it's doing
different.
something different to the light, whereas that white piece of paper is reflecting the light, and the black color is taking it in.
But there's still blues and there's still
True.
purples.
Right.
And even though you may not see it, you would put it in there.
Mhm.
You actually just know that where you're going to go cooler and where you're going to go lighter. Yeah.
So would you say that the paintings that are behind you was light that you actually saw or that you perceived?
Okay, so most of those works came from black and white photographs. All of them did, actually. And in white and black, and that's because I'm using archival stuff, except for this horse, that horse. I don't know about this, but this little girl, those Indians there, all black and white. So I have to inject. So I'm first of all working light and dark, and then I'm injecting what color I want it to be. So I'm going to do warm and cool, that kind of a thing. Did that answer that, or?
Yes.
Yeah. But those are all really, there's very few colors in them because I wanted to keep it in that family of, so it would look old, I guess I would say. Instead of, and I have painted a lot of Indians where I have just done them more like the cowboy, really woo, you know, and those were done all about color. And they were very abstract and fun and different. But those sold, some didn't, so this seems to be working good right now, and I can change.
But like say the cowboy over here,
Right.
with the red and
Right.
the green background, that wasn't actually there.
No, I mean,
And he wasn't actually a blue cowboy with orange
Yeah.
pants.
He was actually, had a blue shirt on, but he had on like those chaps. And so I used that as a suggestion, but then I started to play more with patterns and colors and shapes, and more abstract, for sure.
I see,
Yeah.
yes.
So I changed that totally out of my imagination, but I still use color to make it work. Had I not, it would not work. You know, they wouldn't be separated enough. So I still applied the same thinking for me, although I abstracted that one out.
Okay.
And that one out, and that one out, and that one for sure. And this one up here was a blue. Everything is in blues and orange, opposites, you know, primarily. Yeah, and I think it's always good to know that we change in our colors. I had colors in my oil box that I had never even touched for years. I don't know what they were for. I use them all the time now. One of them was phthalo green, which people say, oh, never use that. It's just horrible. And the other was Venetian red. Those are the two colors I use primarily now. So you change, you know, you go, oh, that's really dramatic. I kind of like that. But it evolves and changes. But once again, going back to color theory, is you kind of understand why you're doing it. I'm always using opposites still to make things, you know, come out. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Or can I
Anybody
explain
else?
anything any further?
Think
Are
that-
y'all totally confused?
No,
No.
perfect.
Did it make a little sense? Okay.
Makes
Thank you
You're
so
so
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having